Rabbi Gottesman, of course, to Rav Weiss, Shlicha for his extraordinary words, Rabbi Gottesman for arranging everything, and for doing me the schus of being able to participate. Today, we're between Pashas Kairach and Pashas Chukas, and today is Vav Tammuz. I was thinking, I'd like to read to the Olam some remarkable words from the Tosfos Yontif that relates to things that I think people are quite familiar with. But the Tosfos Yontif is telling us the following. Shamati mimenu. He's talking about a source that he had in his extraordinary work called Megillas Eva, of where the Tosfos Yontif reviews all the tzaras, his life story and the tzaras that he went through, and his Mesiras Nefesh for Torah and Habotzas Torah. And in it he brings the famous story that's brought in the Magen Avram, B'Shem, the Sefer Tanya, which is B'Shem the Shibul HaLeket, of Vav Chukas, which is this week, Erev Shabbos. But he brings it with something extraordinary. And if there are any klach of the Tosfos Yontif listening and not aware of this, I think that they should listen carefully. Bizman Kedvarim ha'elu mikubalim shebizman yoizrei gezeiros. In the days of the period of the Rishonim, and unfortunately that coincides with the Crusades and various other edifas, Goizrei gezeiros goza hamal, in those days, goza hamalchus bechamisha b'chodesh Tammuz. Yiu nisrafim sifrei hakodesh shel Yehudim v'chachmei adar. There was a gezeira against the Talmud, particularly. The story, of course, is a very terrible story of, once again, a Jewish apostate, a meshumid, by the name of Nicolas Donin in France, who had run to the king, as well to the king and to the Pope, and had brought 35 arguments against the Talmud, against Shas. And he achieved from them that they came out with this decree of the burning of the Talmud and the Svarim that are related to the Talmud, for the reasons that not negate to go into now. Versteht sich what the Sinas Hadas, the Sinas HaTorah was. Osu she'elas cholam al zeh. So the Tosfos Yontif is bringing, which we're going to see soon in the Magen Avram, but it's very interesting what he brings. They did the Chachamim, the Rishonim, make a Sheilas Chacham, they ask in a Chalaim, whatever that means. And they were told, Zois Chukas HaTorah Kitagumai. Please take a look in the Targum. The Seder HaPasha Zois Hayi B'Shvua Hi Pashas Chukas. Upaschu HaChachamim, and the Chachamim said, we see the connection between this Gezeira and between Pashas Chukas. Shehu Kitagumai. Like it says in Tagamunkel, is Da Gezeiras Oiraisa. Da Begematria Chamisha. Says the Tosfos Yontif, B'chashafti l'mishpat she'hagezeira niyois al sfarim shali. I also had a similar circumstance. Nifsak aleim b'tchil levarim in ha'olam. That there was a official decree to destroy the Svarim of the Tosfos Yontif. We know that his Madane Yontif in Svarim, originally it was Madane Melech, and that was considered revolution. Ubavuram huchachti lisoya b'chamisha b'tamuz miPrag l'chatza hakira that the kesa ki achas dva bala cholam al gezeira keduma. And to me, it's the same thing that gezeira that happened in 1242 and what's happening in the 17th century, 500 years later, or 400 years later to the Tosfos Yontif, he says it's all one gezeira. The gezeiras araisa, it's a gezeira against the Torah. ושמעתי עם הגזירה הזויס, וגם אנוכי שנתפסתי על דברי תורה, כאמור, בי"ז בתמוז. His arrest was also on Shiva Asa B'Tammuz. So therefore he says to his children, V're'isi al kocha, v'al asher higia alai, ligza aleichem v'al zarechem. Like the Shach was mitzaveh to his Einiklach to fast. On Chof Sivan, the Taisus Yontif is mitzaveh to his grandchildren. Aleichem v'al zarechem, habonim, bonai, v'habonais benoisai, v'chasnai, v'kaloisai, ad bias hamashiach, lotzum es yoim hachamishi, l'choidish tamuz, ad acha yitzias habeis haknesses arvis. Ya'an u'biyan shu be'emtza hakayitzki she'ayoim godel, l'chein loy gezati ad seisa kechavim. Since it's a very, very long day, it's the longest days of the year, so I let you out, finish the tainus v'yitzia from the Beis HaKnesses, but don't wait till Yitzias HaKochavim. Ve'im yochel b'Shabbos HaKodesh, like yesterday, yenitchel yom aleph, like today. V'achas man mincha gedoyle yichon lehispal v'lo yashlimu ha'tainus yosef. And then he goes into whoever's not feeling well. Imagine a gezerah, imagine a tzavah of the Heilige Tosfos Yontif to all his progeny and all the generations that are to follow. A tainus, a lange tainus for the gezerah on his ksavim, which he saw a connection to the gezerah of the what's brought in the Magen Avram. Let's take a look at the Magen Avram for a moment, Rabbi Say, who recounts from the Sefer Shibula, from the Sefer Tanya Rabasi is one of the Rishonim, and he brings from the Shibululei Haleket. B'yoyim Hashishi Pashas Chukas, Nohagu Yechidim Lehsanois. This is in Shulchan, in Magen Avram, Siman Tov Kuf Pei. There's a minig for Yechidim to fast on Vav Chukas. Sheba'oisa Yom Nischafu, and there's two versions, Chaf or Chaf Dalid, Koronois Meleim Svarim B'Tzofas. This is France, Paris. Not far from where France experienced in the last year or so also a great schreifa. One should take note. V'loi kovu oisi b'mei hachodesh. V'loi kovu oisoi, excuse me, b'mei hachodesh b'pnei shemitoch shelas chacham noida lahem sheyoim hapasha goyrem gizeres haTorah. He adds something that's not in the Tosfos Yontif, where the shaila was. What was the shaila? The shaila is when, since this happened on Tes Tammuz, and it happened on Erev Shabbos Pashas Chukas. So what is the day? And was paskin that the Pasha is Goyrem. And in the Pasha it says, Zois Chukas HaTorah, Do Gzeiras Oiraisa. So it has to do with the Parsha. Zois Chukas HaTorah, Betagminin Do Gzeiras Oiraisa. And then he adds, V'gam b'shnas tov ches. Years later, Nechavu shnei kehillas gedoylis ba'is ha'yoyim. K'may she'omrim b'slicha shechiba bal ha'sifsei koyin, which the Shach, in the Gzeiras Tach v'Tat, were two great kehillas destroyed. So we have Svarim being destroyed, Sefer told us Adam, and kehillas that were destroyed. The Torah and the people who learned the Torah. And this happened also ba'osai hayoim. And then he brings Chaf Sivan. It's a Dava Pella. It's more than just a historical note of interest. It's also far more than just reading this and saying there are Yechidim who fast. I'm not a Yachid. It's not for me. This is a Gezerah in ganz Klal Yisrael. And the way it's understood is that this is Gezeras HaTorah, this is a Gezerah against the Torah. And when Svarim are destroyed, or the people who learn the Svarim, Rachman al-Islam, the Gezerah is not only on Klal Yisrael, the Gezerah is on the Torah itself. This is what we're being taught in the Tanya Rabasi is quoted by the Magen Avram and is quoted by the Tosfos Yontif. So today is Vav Tammuz, And if someone is an enikel of the Tosfos Yantif, until, which is almost upon us, Mincha Gedaila, he had a special day. But we have to be mispainin ourselves. As a matter of fact, Shali Sufa Ba'esh, that was written by the Maram Rothenberg, it's a mashma'is that the Maram Rothenberg at that time was in Paris. This took place in the time of the Balei Tosfos. As we know, the Maram Rothenberg was one of the Balei HaTosfos, the Rebbe of the Rosh, of the Mordcha, of the Agas Maimonides. And one of his, I use the word Yedidim, al Balei HaTosfos, Rabbi Yechiel mi Paris, was never subjected to the debate that had to take place before the Sreifa. He and three other Chachamim, and Rahman al-Islam, of course, they lost the debate, as one would imagine. And it's reported that over 10,000 kisvei yad were destroyed. Rabbi said we're talking about hundreds of years before the invention of the printing press. These are handwritten ksavim. 10,000 ksavim, 10,000 copies of Masechtas, and of course, Rishonim on those Masechtas. Rashi, the first Tosfos, the Rif. But I think we should a bit take some time to be mispainin on what happened in that She'elas Chaloim, in the She'ela that they presented to the Chala, to higher up in a dream. I don't understand the words that I'm repeating, but there is such an inyan where HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends us messages through another medium, and to those extraordinary people who are able to channel that medium. So b'She'elas Chaloim, they found out that the inyan is Erev Shabbos and not the day of the month. I'd like to discuss that inyan with the Olam a bit. As a matter of fact, this happened for Ashkenaz, but it's brought in the Sefer Moed Kol Chai. Reb Chaim Palagi brings that he remembers as a child that they experienced this also. He writes, "Ubeirenu Izmir nehirna mechad havina talya." I remember as a child to have a kama anoshim soicherim shohayu nizarim lotzeis afilu l'shuk l'eskayim be'erev Shabbos chelkas. That there were business merchants who would not go out into the public shuk on erev Shabbos chelkas. Ma shohayu lahem lasses be'erev Shabbos hoya oisim u'misaknim miyom chamishi, and he connects this, of course, to the inyan of the Shibulei Halakha. Rabbi said, why is it an inyan of Erev Shabbos as opposed to the date of the month, which we find normally Tainus, Shabbat B'Tammuz, Tisha B'Av. They're all related to the month. They're not related to the week. There's a remarkable letter from the Ramchal. Ramchal was asked by his own Rebbe, Rabbi Shaya Basan. He was asked the question if he has something to say on what's happening now in Italy. When I say now, in his time, there seem to have been gezeres and the burning of Svarim as well. And this is the lashon of the Ramchal. I'm just going to begin because I don't want to read too much. Al inyan gezeres hasvarim asher medinas hakoimer. Of course, that refers to the papacy. So he says to his Rebbe, you know that I don't speak about these in Yanim. For various reasons in the history of the Ramchal, he restrained himself and refrained himself from discussing matters that he held was more soidos. But he does mention besides so I would like to explain to you a little bit, he says to his Rebbe, what I think is going on here. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, and we had a Parah Aduma, so then the Parah Aduma was sacrificed to save Klal Yisrael. to save the Tahara of Klal Yisrael, and his lashon is V'soid hadavu hu mamish inyan aparaduma shashchina moiseres atzma l'sreifes din hachozuk lahatzelis Yisrael v'hi anituach l'taharas v'hi anisenes l'taharas hamesim she'en lahem tahara elahi. So therefore, since the way to save the inyan of Misa and Tumah, and he discusses this in a more mystic manner. He said the para is the kapara for that. And the para has its lifespan, so to say, the kapara shabai. And there is a time when that runs out and it's time for a new para aduma. But what happens if we don't have a para aduma? So he says, "V'hinei k'moishe kol tzor para achas hayitzorich lasos acheres." When one para was used up, we needed a new para aduma. Kach tikun echad miskayim ad zman shemiskayim aval behiskaba hekitroigim. When the kitroigim are renewing forces, we need another ticket. And he says that ticket is Adam ki yamus ba'ohel. So in other words, Para Aduma is here to take care of the problem of Adam ki yamus ba'ohel. Adam ki yamus ba'ohel results in Tumah. And the Para Aduma will take care. But if we have no Para Aduma, so then bleibt this Adam ki yamus ba'ohel. And Adam ki yamus ba'ohel means the danger that Klal Yisrael is faced with. So if there's no para to sacrifice itself, unbelievably, says the Ramchal, then the Torah itself is ready to sacrifice itself for Klal Yisrael. And those are the gezeiros that happened against the Torah. Startling, stunning words. So how do we prevent that? Says the Ramchal, we prevent that is through faked, another taich of Adam ki yamas ba'ohel. If people will devote themselves to the Torah, to learning, with complete devotion, where they recognize that this is our chiyus, the alternative of Zois HaTorah, Adam ki yamas ba'ohel, that the opposite, that the Misa of Klal Yisrael, Rachmana litzlan, that is prevented through the Limud HaTorah, and the Torah is ready to give itself if there won't be Limud HaTorah. So in other words, it's a sacrifice between the Torah and ourselves. But if we give ourselves over in another form of Adam ki yamas ba'ohel, that Divrei Torah are not miskayim ela b'misha meimis atzmo yoleh, he says, then that will be the antidote, and that will save us. And he says that therefore he was misakin various tikkunim in his koilel in Padua, which it's hard to go into details. But what it says over here is that the Ramchal is telling us that the Vav Chukas danger of Gezeira on the Torah is that the Torah itself is ready to be sacrificed for us. But then if we have no Torah, we have no us. So there's another way. The way is that we sacrifice ourselves for us, which will preserve the Torah and preserve us. And there's a way to sacrifice ourselves. The way to sacrifice ourselves is not Chalila B'chas, Adam ki yamus ba'ohel, the taich that results in Tumah, but the Adam ki yamus ba'ohel, whose results will be understood through chiyus. Rabbi Say, I'd like to suggest, I feel compelled to repeat this Ramchal, even though it's way above us and beyond us, and to institute what he did, which he had a koilel in which there was absolutely no hefsek, so that the Chalil B'chas should not be like the Nefesh Chaim brings. There shouldn't be hefsekim from devotion to Limud HaTorah. Perhaps, Lefi Erkeinu, for our own understanding, I'd like to mention two nekudas. Nekuda number one. There is the difference between Chodesh and Yom lies in the difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov. Yom Tov is a product of Rosh Chodesh, or I should say a consequence of Rosh Chodesh. And Rosh Chodesh is a product of a Makadish's Amo Yisrael. The Hazmanim, as the Gemara says in Be'ah, the Zmanim are made by us. Zmanim are produced by us. If we produce Zmanim, so it's Makadish Yisrael Vazmanim. If it comes together with Shabbos, Makadish Shabbos Yisrael Vazmanim. And it would sound like the Gemara tells us, it would sound that it's incongruous, because you should have Shabbos and Yont and Zmanim together, or Yisrael either at the beginning or at the end. And the Teretz is no, because Shabbos, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mekadesh. He's also Mekadesh Yisrael. And Klal Yisrael, with its Kedusha, has the ability to make Yontif. So Yontif is a product of Kedushas Yisrael, and Shabbos is the Eibishter's, and Shabbos is Kvi V'Kaimi. We don't make Shabbos. Shabbos comes, whether we make it or makabel it or not. Yontif we make. As a matter of fact, that which we make ourselves, of course, has a very extraordinary chashivas. Famous Sfas Emes with regard to Havdalah, which time doesn't allow right now to go into. But the chilik between Shabbos and Yontif, again, is Yontif is our product, Shabbos is the product of, directly from Kudsha B'richu. The days of the week are Shabbos Dike Inyanim. The days of the month are Chodesh Dike Inyanim. Rabbi say, the Parshiyos are related to the days of the week. That which we learn on Yontif has to do with the days of the month, and it has a completely different Inyan. If we're to understand that the Parshas HaShavua has to do, like the Shalah HaKadosh brings, and like Zmavu and Midrashim, has to do with the events of the week, so we'll understand that this is a Shabbos Dika Inyan. The Shabbos Dika Inyan means it has nothing to do with us. We're a product just like Shabbos is a product. And the Inyan of the Torah, we have to understand, is similar. The Inyan of the Torah is that the Torah is histakel baraisa or bara alma, the entire world and the bria, everything is Shabbos, is Bereshis, it's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the first Rashi in Chumash. If so, a gezeira against the Torah is not something that has to do with our calendar, the one that we have a hand in and control, but has to do with the original Brias HaOlam Dika calendar. Brias HaOlam is being challenged. Dog Gzeiras HaRaisa, Brias HaOlam. The world is Niskayim al HaTorah. It's one of the amudim of the world. It's what the Torah is Niskayim on. And as the Nefesh Chaim says, if Chalila B'chas there would be a pause or a hefsek for the slightest amount of time in Limud HaTorah, Chalila B'chas the Bria would not have its kiyum. It wouldn't be able to maintain itself. So therefore, something that attacks the Torah attacks Brias HaOlam. It attacks the pillars on which the world stands. That is a Shabbos Dika Inyan, and it's not a Yontif Dika Inyan. It's not a Chodesh Dika Inyan. If I'm saying Shabbos Yontif, just l'save es ha'oizen. It's Mamela, it has to do with the Parsha. Shabbos you can't fast, just like we saw from the Taisus Yontif with regard to Hey Tammuz. So Vov, which is closest, perhaps, that is closest to the Parsha, to the what's going to be read on Shabbos. That's the closest. So Mamela Vov Chukas more than Tes Tammuz. Perhaps it's a thought that'll help us along. After I thought this Indian, I found that the Goyen, Rab Simcha Zisel Broide, in his Some Derech, marvelous sefer that he has on Chumash and Ramban, he doesn't address, he addresses the Shaila, and I was delighted to see he brings these Mekayres, even the Reb Chaim Balaji, and he adds his own beautiful rayas he brings that the structure of the parshas of the Torah have to do with the Kiyum Ha'olam in a very beautiful and depth way. And I was delighted that at least I'm on the right road. But I want to read to you something that he brings at the very end of his shtickle. And then I would like to move over to amplifying what he said. After he explains, not with the Shabbos and Yontif model that I mentioned, but with some beautiful, beautiful structure of Chazal, that the Kiyum Ha'olam is also dependent on the Parshiyos that we read, and he goes through a sugya of the structure of Parshiyos. He ends off with a footnote, and I think this is an important footnote. Mitochen hadvarim shenizbaru lomadnu ki malas limud haTorah einena rak machmas goydel v'hashivas mitzvahs Talmud Torah elagam machmas zeh shekiyum mitzvahs habriya ubriyas ha'olamos nifal al yedei lomdei Torah. He says that in addition to the inyan of Talmud Torah, it's mitzvah, it's chashivas for itself, but he adds that there's something more. That everybody, even the person who's not learning, has to understand that the Kiyum Ha'olam is based on someone's learning. Hopefully his own, but if it's not his own, it's someone else's. But on Limud HaTorah, there's no Kiyum to the Olam. So he says, Kama Otzuv, how sad, Umitzah, and painful, Shashkofa Zua Hepech HaGomor, that this view that the Kiyum Ha'olam is based on Limud HaTorah. He says, tough with a tough and with a test. For those who are wandering and meandering in life, and for those who are misled. And then he says a language that I don't want to even repeat. Dafka loimdei Torah heim hamachatshim v'hayotzrim v'hamakayim esabriya v'eskol ha'olam v'heim balei yisoret tachas hashemesh v'hasha hevel havolim hakoil hevel. Very strong words. And nicht von Fabatlon Shteid. Simcha Zisel Breude, the Rashiv of Chevron. Zeichet Tzadik L'Bracha. If we would all appreciate and understand that every gezerah that exists against the limud haTorah, that gezerah not only endangers the limud, but endangers the kiyum of the world. And people have to look at learning Torah not simply as an occupation, but learning itself sustains the world. It's not just an occupation for the Chavrei HaKollel or for my kids while they're in yeshiva, but later in life, not like the phrase I once heard as a child, Zun is noch in Kollel or Tutshay Nepes. Your son is still in Kollel or is he doing something already? How sad are those words? Those are the words that Reb Simcha Zisel Breude is addressing. Rabbi say. The Tosfos Yantif, the Magen Avram, based on the Tanya Rabasi, the Rishonim and the Shibulei Lekid, saw in the Schefus HaTalmud not the fact only that we are losing books, libraries are being destroyed. What they saw is that we, not our world, the entire world is being destroyed. Like the Gemara says in Sukkah, had the Goyim realized how much they are maintained by the Beis HaMikdash, they themselves would never have destroyed it. Sometimes we destroy that, the proverbial biting the hand that feeds us. Gzeiras Araisa. We're living in very, very difficult times. This year alone, we've been challenged many, many times. We've been in the last year and a half, been challenged by the obtrusive intervention of foreign hands inspired by some of the donins of our generations who are trying to stretch their hands into the curricula of the yeshivas. When their houses are so untidy, they decided to clean ours first. But the true design, we understand. Some of them themselves don't understand that they're instruments of the true design, which is no different than the 24 wagon loads or Chalil B'chas, the two great kehillas. We've been challenged by a worldwide pandemic that we have not seen the end of, and we hope we've seen the end of the beginning of. We're challenged in a world where one of the only things that the right and the left can agree about is squeezing the yid in the middle. And that is all universal, unanimous agreement that the yid is a problem. I think that when we're going to reattack Columbus, we're going to hear back to Kaiserling's and other writers' theories that he was Jewish. That would make, of course, that would be so neat and tidy. We're being squeezed in many, many ways. Baruch Hashem, Klal Yisrael is resourceful. I think that the venue that we have right this moment, the venue in which Agudas Yisrael, and through the very able hands of Rav Gottesman, have kept this going when our Batei Midrashim were challenged and our yeshivas are still challenged. And Lipa Torah is challenged. That's Gzeiras Haraisa. It's Gzeiras Haraisa. It's not a Gzeira of sinner. It's a Gzeira where HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent us through medical issues, sent us Gzeiras Haraisa. We have to deal more directly with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But maybe the answer is what the Ramchal taught us. If we're moisa ourselves more, if the Adam Kiyamas Ba'ayil, She'ein Divrei Torah Miskaimel B'misha Meimis Atzmai Aleha, where a person says to himself, there's a famous mashal of the Chafetz Chaim, where the Chafetz Chaim says about the fellow who closed his store for 2 hours a day to sit and learn. And his brother, his partner, came knocking on the base medrash door and said, "What's the matter with you? The business is open." And he asked, if I had been nifta, would you be knocking on my metzeva? He'd say, "What can I do? I leb nicht." He said, "So you should know every morning from 9 to 11, ich leb nicht. Adam ki yamas ba'ayil, ich leb nicht. Don't knock on my metzeva." It's Chafetz Chaim's mashal, a little bit altered for the occasion. If everybody would understand that he has to have his Adam ki yamas ba'ayil in his life, and that replaces the paraduma, so then the Chalil B'chas, the Torah, does not have to replace what we're supposed to replace in the concept of the Ramchal. So the Eibishter's helping again. Today on Vav Tammuz, on the day that the Tosfos Yantiv's Einiklach, who are aware of this, have fasted until Mincha, on the day that Gans Klal Yisrael was challenged, Hey Tammuz was when the Gezeira of the Schreifas HaTalmud began. The Eibishter is helping that all Gezeiras against learning, Gezeiras against health, Gezeiras against Batei Midrashim, Gezeiras against yeshivas, that they come in different forms and different antagonists, but the protagonist remains the same. So the Eibishter is Allah helping that we should be Zoicha in the schus of Adam Ki Yamas Ba'ayil to be Mizgaba on all the Gezeiras. And we'd like to thank once again Rabbi Gottesman and Agudas Yisrael for the schus and the opportunity to be able to share some Dvray Torah with you. I hope it was helpful in these days approaching Pashas Chukas. Kol Tuv, thank you very much.